What Australia culture value about creativity? Everything. um, Look, we are a very, very diverse community. I think we have up to 100 different cultures and languages. And I have to say that one of the strengths that we have here in Australia is that we really have integrated those cultures in very different ways in terms of the different kinds of food that people eat here, the different ways in which people art that is displayed. So I think that the variety that we have here and the tolerance of that kind of variety is one of the strengths that we have. And also recently has been strong efforts in terms of including the legacy of the Aboriginal people, which were the first settlers of this country. And there is a lot of effort made by the government and the community in integrating that to some degree was almost in the background into today living. So while we are a very young nation, only 200 years, and we don't have the history and the legacy that other nations may have, I think that is a very interesting one in terms of the unique contribution that we are having here. I'm not sure if the question was related to that or more to the business context.
No, that's good.
So it has to be a lot of tolerance of diversity and different cultures, which I think again is part of creativity. Suspend judgment. You have to be tolerant of individuals' differences, different personalities, cultural backgrounds, and so forth.
Great, thank you. I'll give him his little thank you so he knows. Thank you, that was good. And as you think of cultures, I know that I've had an opportunity to work in different countries, and I've often wondered, how do I approach, and I do training, and how do I approach different cultures? What's the language that I use? What kind of tools might work, or what kind of activities, or what kind of concepts? And when I was going to the Middle East, I actually, Mary and I sat down with Randah, who was very helpful in, what are some of those things you want to watch out for? What might be some things that might offend a culture, or what are some things that cultures embrace that would be a good way to start? So that was very useful to me. And I don't know if you have anything you want to add around that whole cultural, how do our students coming out working with different cultures really begin to examine what they do in light of how different cultures might react to it?
Well, I don't know about like all cultures. I can speak for where I come from. I was born in the Middle East, and I lived there the first part of my life, and before I moved to Canada. And so I think in some ways there are some different things, but in many ways they are exactly the same. It's a matter of, like I said before, knowing what is the story behind something. So if someone does, if there's a way of greeting, or a way of even standing next to each other, or if there's a story behind it, you can simply ask. And people, this I can say all over the world, if you ask, you get more helpful response than just assuming that this is the case or this is how it should be. So because sometimes we go with, okay, this is obvious, this is how we should greet, or this is obvious how we should respond when someone does say something, and so I think that's what I have. Yeah.
Great, thanks. We do have a caller, but before we take a caller, Marci, was there anything that you wanted to add to?
Well, yeah, hitchhiking off of what Randah was saying, and looking at some of the characteristics that's commonly associated with being creative, which is keeping one's curiosity open. So that is another way of saying that.
Yeah.
It's to ask the questions, right? It's to ask the questions. And I also want to build on something that Sebastian said. It's not about tolerating the differences. It's about leveraging them. It's about honoring them. It's not about putting up with them. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's about recognizing the richness in the tolerances and the tolerances and the differences and helping people work through that, as opposed to, oh God, I got to put up with it. You know what I'm saying? So I want to take it to the next level. It's not about tolerating. It's about working with. So it's not about tolerating ambiguity. It's about working with the ambiguity. It's not just putting up with. I think the 50s and 60s we put up with. The 70s, who knows where we were, and the 80s, who knew where we were. But where it is that we are now is that we work with the energy as opposed to just say that I'm right. What if all of us are right?
Yeah.
All of us are right. Now how do we work together? As opposed to I'm right and you're wrong. So that's where I went on that.
If I have just one more something, even to add to it, even the way we look at creativity, and you know I always bring that up in every class.
Yeah.
Depending on where you come from, you look at creativity in a completely new way. So one of the things I focused on during my study was creativity around the world. And I found so many things that were really amazing. For example, in Germany, the studies of problem-solving techniques are 100 years old. In Russia, looking at creativity is a very intuitive way, and most of the creative psychologists or creative educators are women, unlike in the US, where it's dominated by men and it's more cognitive than holistic or feeling. In Africa, it's more about movement. How you move, it shows how creative you are. So it's a whole, it's a different way of looking at it in Scandinavia. And this is something that I was really interested in. And I think you read about Goran Ekvall, the Swedish, he's like, I think, a business consultant, and he put the 10 dimensions for creative environments. Well, I thought that he was the only one or one of the main ones, but when I went into the literature, there are hundreds, but they all write in Swedish, but there are hundreds, and in the Scandinavian region, they focus on the creative environment. So if you want to know how to build a creative environment, look at what they're doing and build on that. Look at what they're doing in terms of holistic approaches in Russia, and then build on that. And then you can have a really good way of tapping different cultures from their own windows.
Who is the one who wrote The Cultures of Organizations?
What do you mean?
Oh, what's his name?
I don't know.
He took all the IBM data and took a look at different cultures and was able to pinpoint their characteristics, whether they were power distance and what's his name?
Is it Todd?
Hofstede.
Hofstede.
So you might be able to pick up some interesting clues from how they perceive what creative is, because as you were talking about the Scandinavians, it was fitting the Hofstede description of what their culture, their cultural climate was. So that might be an interesting insight, is to go to resources such as that.
And if you can find it in their language, it's even better than
And then
it's
if you can
translated.
understand that
So
language.
Exactly. But yeah, if you can find someone who can explain it to you from that culture, they'll
Yeah.
tell you the inside meaning that
Yeah.
you probably will just miss just looking at literature. I know that when I'm looking at an Arabic book that I read, and then I read the translation, I could not recognize what they're like talking about. They have to break it down to different ways so that the English reader will understand it compared to that culture or whatever it is. But in Arabic, you just don't need to explain it. It just happens. So
Yeah.
again, how you look at it.
Well, and I'll also tell you, I've done a little bit of travel too to different countries and different cultures and so on. And I've gotten to the point where if someone from a culture so different from my own asks me to do work with them, as much as I would love to go and have the experience of working in that place, I would much rather know someone who lives there that I can trust and provide an introduction so that that can happen. I would much rather the same language be spoken than assume that I can handle what it is that they're doing.